Hello skating fans out there, thanks a lot for tuning in. In this video, my coach, Mitch Whitmore, will be explaining how to sharpen your ice skating blades. If you're not used to it, if you're new to the sport, this can be incredibly complicated. Mitch here has sharpened for basically all my personal records and more than 20 skaters out there. He has can I say a lifetime of experience with sharpening skates?
Lifetime of experience sharpening. I've done way too many blades, and I'm trying to get my skaters to do all of their own as well.
As a little motivational thing here, I want to say that I spend about 2 hours if I sharpen my skates myself. How much does it take you, Mitch?
Hopefully 15 minutes or less to go through the whole process.
So listen carefully here, and it will save you a lot of time and maybe even make you go faster.
Okay, welcome to our sharpening class here on the Global Skating Network. I've got the steps laid out here for us ahead of time, starting off with when to sharpen. While you're skating, I think you're going to get an idea if it's a little bit harder to feel into the ice. If you're newer and don't really have a great feel, but want to have sharp skates, you can just take your finger on the side here carefully and see if your finger or your skin kind of catches on the side of the blade. If it does, then you probably don't need to sharpen. A lot of times you'll notice that in the middle is a little bit weaker. So you really want to make sure that they stay as even as possible across the time that you skate. So these ones are okay, but we're going to go ahead and sharpen anyways. Because again, we want to really create a good edge to push off of. So what we want to see, got a handy dandy little drawing up here. What we want to see is like these two here, okay? So we've got nice right angles at the top, and this applies to both short track and long track. Now, when you see what it would look like up close, a dull skate, these edges would kind of be more round, okay? We want those to be more square or even a little bit of edge sticking up top. Now, what happens when we sharpen is you push the metal down, and so it sticks out to the side. That is what we call burr. And at the end of our steps here, we've got deburr. That means you're going to take a stone, rub it along the side, and that will, in turn, push the edges back up. That's going to be grip. Now, the bigger that is, the slower you're going to be because that's kind of drag into the ice, but you'll have more grip. So it's going to be up to you to kind of guess and check and see how much kind of burr you're actually looking for, what feels the best to you. There's really no right or wrong answer on that. Okay, step number 2, I like to have all my equipment prepped. So we've got a nice spread here of our stones on a towel, which we'll use later. Obviously, you got your skates, the jig here, a deburr stone, some oil, and water. Now, on the stones that we're going to talk about today, I'm using Diamond and the Nagano skate stones. On both of those, you just want to use water. You don't use oil. You use oil only on the natural stones, okay? When I go to deburr to keep the stone clean, which is going to be a natural stone here, you're also going to use oil on that. It just keeps it nice and fresh. Okay, now that we have everything laid out in front of us, it's time to set our skates up in the jig. Now, before we actually put the skates in there, you're going to want to check your jig, make sure everything is tight in the right spots. You should really mark your jig, make sure it's the same every time. You also want to make sure that these top stops are on there. I know a lot of you short trackers don't use top stops, but you really should, because the difference in blade height from the front to back, or if you set them up slightly different, could make the blade or the sharpening stone on there sit just a hair different each time you sharpen, and you want the most consistent sharpen each time. Okay, so we've got our top stops on nice and tight, nice and tight. Everything's labeled front and back, and we have our backstop here too. Okay, so you're going to take your skates, place them in the jig. They're sitting in the jig now. Now you're going to want to lift them up to the top stops and tighten them down. Okay, you don't need to go crazy on the tighten, but you just want to make sure that they're snug and obviously not going to push down after you start sharpening. Okay, now that they're set in there, we can take the top stops off. And we are ready to get going here. Now, as we checked before on when to sharpen, we kind of want to know what the damage is here. So we've got assessing the damage on the blades. How heavy do we need to give it a sharpen? Now, if it's been a few days and you feel like you need a little bit more edge on those suckers, I think you go with the red stone. I think you can start there and really just check along the way. Everything is going to be sharpen, check, make sure you've got enough edge everywhere. If you have some strips on your blade, which I'll cover later as well, but some shiny spots that are clearly cut down if you're in the mass start and you're kicking blades, or you're a club level skater and there's a bunch of chaos around you at times, I would say you can go with the blue stone every once in a while to bring everything back down to neutral. The black stone, I think that's pretty universal. I would avoid at all costs unless you just had your skates re-rocked, or maybe have a coach use it, because it's really going to take off a lot of the edge of your blade here. A lot of metal is going to come down, and it can change the rock on your blades pretty easily. So now it's time to actually do the deed here. Again, I've got these really nice Nagano skate stones. These you are only going to want to use water on there. I really just think it helps you when you wipe the blades to see how much you've actually taken off, and it just keeps the stone a little bit cleaner, easier to clean afterwards as well. Okay, so again, Nagano skate stones, we're going to start with the red. So we spray our little water on there. And when you're first starting out, I would recommend that you count your strokes here. Maybe you start with 10 strokes if you have a really fresh stone, because it's going to cut really quickly. If they're older stones or your blades are pretty screwed up, then you can start with a few more strokes, or later on you may not need to count at all. Okay, so we'll start with 10 and see where we're at. I also take a little tissue, wipe these off in between. And here comes the check part of this. So usually leave a little bit of a fingernail grown out just to be able to check the side. So what I'm doing is I'm running my finger along the side of the blade here, upwards, try to pull straight up. If you feel it catch or you hear that noise, that means you've got a little bit of burr that's pushed down, and that's what we're looking for when we sharpen. Now, I don't have a consistent burr everywhere from those 10 strokes, so I'm going to want to use the red again and just keep going through this process.
10 more strokes here.
And now we recheck. Now, some of you might be wondering, I think this is a question that's asked pretty often, of whether you should sit, stand, kneel. I don't know what the best way is. My personal preference is to stand. I feel like I get a better base for it. I feel like I can keep things more even. And it also hurts my back to sit down. So standing is just better for me. But you can go with whatever makes it so it's an even sharpen. I also want to mention, I'm not pushing down with too much force, just enough to keep the stone down and get some traction with the stone on the blades. So we're making a little progress here. I'm feeling burr on most of the edges. Now on the right inner, there's still a little bit. That's the right inside of your foot. Usually that's the most used spot and gets dull the quickest. So that's the one you're going to want to check for the most often. But we're going to hit this with another 10 to 15 strokes this time and see if we can finish it out. Now that we have consistent burr everywhere on the blades, we're going to go ahead and shift down. Now, in order here, if you do end up starting with the blue stone, which I didn't have to, you're going to start with the blue, go red, and then either the green or gold. Again, this is only if you have either the diamond or the Nagano skate stones. The natural stones are a little bit different there. But you'll want to do blue, red, green. And in some cases, if you really it took a long time with the blue, so you have tons of edge there, you're probably going to want to deburr afterwards. So in that case, I would go blue, red, and then you're polishing, so green or gold there. Deburr, put them back in, and then red and gold or green to finish off with another deburr. Okay? So for us, we're going to take the gold stone next. Same thing. We're going to give it a little water, and then we're going to give it some more strokes here.
Let me check, just to make sure.
So now in the polishing portion, what I'm looking for is a nice shiny top. Some of these rougher stones can make the top look a little bit more foggy. And what we want to see is kind of ourselves back in the stone. So I'm going to usually go through with the gold with maybe 15 strokes, wipe it, 15 strokes, wipe, and then one more time. And that's usually enough with these gold stones to give it a nice polish on top. Sometimes you may want to do a little bit more if you really had to rough these up. Again, green is about the same grit level, so it should be about the same amount of strokes for you on that one. So we'll go again. Okay, I think we're all done with our polishing stone. On the top here, I can see my own eyes in the reflection, and so I feel pretty good about this sharpening job, and they're ready to come out of the jig. Okay, so we just loosen them, pop these guys out, and now we move on to deburring. So this is probably the more precarious part of the whole sharpening process is the deburring. I like to use a natural stone. This one has kind of a nice wedge on it. You can also use flat stones. There are kind of the same material as these Nagano skate stones. I think the same company makes them. So you can get burr stones just like that. You could also get regular diamond burr stones. There's a lot of options. There's carbide stones. Be sure to check out another video we're planning to make soon on jigs, other equipment, really all the ins and outs of skating equipment. We'll also hit up the inline side and specifically short track side of things as well. Okay, so now we have our skate here. I try to take the side. You really want to make sure it is solid. I also recommend sitting just to make sure things are more steady. But first thing you're going to do, put a little oil on your stone. Again, that's only if you have any natural stones. If you have the other types of stones, you're just going to use either water or nothing on those. Okay, put a little dab of oil, and you're going to put the stone on the edge of the blade here only. Okay, so you're just going to put it on there. Make sure you don't touch the lip or the paint of the tube itself. Okay, so just the shiny metal part down below. We're going to put the burr stone flat on top of there. Take our little towel just to make it slide easier. Not everybody uses a towel underneath. I just find it to be a little bit safer and easier, especially if you're deburring a lot of skates. And you're going to just pinch from the bottom side and the top side, straight through with each. Not a ton of pressure. As you find when you work with more and more skates, some people's blades are going to really need a harder hold. Hopefully, if you're doing it right, it should be a pretty easy deburr most of the time through. Now, the first thing I did is just slide that across, making sure not to obviously come off of the blade or go up and touch the paint portion of the tube. Okay. We'll replace it down at the bottom here. And same thing, you're just going to slide nice and easy up top. You can go down. And I think it's necessary to make it just one solid motion. Some people do a chopping motion back and forth, but I think it works best just to go full solid motions. Okay, now this is where we go and check. This is where, when we checked before on the jig and we felt that little noise or our finger catching, now we really do not want it to catch. Again, this goes back to pushing that burr that was on the sides here. You're gonna wanna push that up, or you're chopping some of it off as well. Really trying to make those nice right angles. So here, I don't hear any noise as we go up the blade. So it feels like to me, we got all of the burr off. Now, easy way to check this as well is, again, checking to see if it grips your skin finger on the side here, and it is catching all the way down. Now, on the other side, if we were to check when I have not deburred that, it should not feel like it catches much at all. There should be a significant difference between the two. So now it's time for this side of the blade. Same thing here. I think it's just personal preference on whether you start from the front or back. I have it in my crazy head that you need to start at the front and work your way to the back, but I think it's all preference there. Okay, now we check again. And I think we got it all. It's very nice when the blades are well taken care of. The less nicks and kicks you can get into your blades, the better. It'll make your life a lot easier and you'll save a lot of time. So we are done with this one. We'll move on to the next blade. For our final check, went through, everything seems to be sharp. There's no leftover burr, what I'm feeling on the side here. Everything seems to be in order. Okay, so a couple other things to note here. Again, personal preference is a big part of all of this. I've noticed that short trackers' personal preference, partly dictated because they have so many races back to back, so they can't be as particular. Long track, we have more of the ability to sharpen and you're good for the day. But again, short track, they're gonna hammer through as quick as they can, deburr, on to the next race. So you're gonna see less usage of the top stops, which I still think you should use, but then they're gonna just take them out, deburr, and off they race. They also tend to like a little bit more overburr on their skates. One, because it takes more time because you'd have to sharpen, deburr, to go through that process to bring that burr down. But also because they're at a lot sharper of angles than long track is. So if you're a short tracker, you may want a little bit more edge on your blades to feel like you've got more grip, less concerned about just the pure glide. Probably a little more important to stay upright on your skates. It's also worth mentioning, we're gonna make this jig in particular is the Stay Bent jig. Had it for a few years now. It's a really, really nice jig. It does a good job of keeping, as it says in the name, it keeps your bend solid. The thought is that some jigs, if it's just straight on, can maybe mess up your bend if you really tighten them. So this keeps that. But we're gonna do some future videos where we talk more in depth about which jigs we think are the best. And we're gonna cover a lot of other equipment, so be sure to tune into those. We'll cover stones, deburring stones, everything that there is to talk about in equipment on ice. We're all finished up here. I'm off to clean the stones and make sure they're all ready for the next time that I end up sharpening some skates. So thank you for tuning in to a GSN equipment production. And be sure to subscribe and check out the next videos that Vic and I make on the channel.
Like, it's gonna be the least intense video. Okay, so what we do here is be patient, don't put your body weight on it.
Should we get that in? Is that recording? That'll be beautiful.